303. We have the pleasure today of welcoming Shawn Farrell, Executive Director of the Bicycle Racing Association of Colorado. And thanks for making the trip to Arvada, Shawn, and sitting 6 feet apart. And we'll talk a little bit about bike racing and the State of the Union and maybe get to know you a little bit better. And how's your day going?
So far, so good. Thanks for having me. This is a unique opportunity. Never got to do a garage talk before.
Well, it's we had to improvise a little today. We started a little late. We had to drag out the old tarp here from the camping equipment to block a little sun. It might be a little chilly in the shade, so we'll get through this okay. But I want to just catch up. A lot's happened, obviously. We've missed a lot of bike races in Colorado. And tell us what's going on with BRAC right now is from your vantage point with the COVID situation.
Well, like everybody else, we're certainly in a waiting game, wondering when we'll restart, hoping it'll be soon. We're trying to keep busy. We're doing things from the most mundane possible, which would be reorganizing the Google Drive and changing the way we do our files and everything, to the biggest forward-thinking processes on where BRAC wants to be in 5 years and how we're going to adapt to the changes we see in cycling and sports in general, the changes at USAC, the different directions that we're going now compared to, say, when I got this job 5 years ago.
So from a kind of a big picture standpoint, what can you share with us where you're at with some of that thinking? When we get back to some level of normalcy, whatever that might be, what do you feel like could be drastically different?
Well, one of the big questions right now is that the race directors are talking about, we're all talking about, is what happens, if tomorrow President Trump said country's open for business and told all the governors you have to open your states, and next weekend a race director put on a race. Are the people ready for that? Do they want to come? We're not even amongst the board. We have differing opinions on that. I think I want to be the race director of the first race, even if it's this coming weekend, but because I think you'd make so many, you have so many riders, it would be incredible. Other people think, no, the population's not ready for this yet, and they don't want to come back for a while. So who knows what the communal thinking's going to be when we finally get there. I think the longer this builds up, the more desperate people are going to be to get out. And I think if we can start racing in June or July, we'll still have a really good season.
Do you think that the fears or the closeness of, say, a crit versus maybe you can do a time trial where people are spread out? How do you look at the different kinds of races and maybe how the operations of the races could change?
Well, logically, if you could do time trials, there's a level of safety there. I could picture a time trial where, like if we were able to run the Cherry Creek, which has been postponed, at least postponed until the fall, might be canceled altogether. But if we were going to, say, be allowed to run that, there probably wouldn't be a holder. You'd have to start with 1 foot down. The officials would probably be standing apart, and you would be forcing everyone to stay separated. But that's really not that big a deal for something like a time trial. So if there were a gradual restart into some forms of cycling, time trial is the obvious place to start.
Right. So let's talk about BRAC a little bit and where you fit as an organization in the role of this decision to come back out. Is it, let's say the governor says we can do it, the county says, okay, cool, you can come to Weld County, you can come to El Paso County, Boulder County, wherever, you can have a race under these certain criteria. Where is it BRAC's part of the decision versus the actual race director of that race? And how do you work together?
Well, we all work together, but the first step is going to be getting the municipalities to agree to allow you to have a permit. There are possibilities, and I think you discussed this with Lance recently. There's situations where I could see where USA Cycling could say that we'll let you permit with us, but the race director might not be able to get a permit. An example, we already know we've lost one race. That was one of our state championships because the race director was told, nope, we're shut down for the rest of the year. Doesn't matter what USA Cycling says or what the governor says. So there's always that. I don't see BRAC really being in that part of a decision-making process. If USA Cycling says we're good to race. And the race director says, I want to put on a race, and the municipality says, who are we to say you can't? I mean, almost all of our races are put on by independent race directors. They're affiliated with us, but it's their race. We don't hold the P&L on their race. So,
right.
They're going to make that call.
So maybe for some people that are watching and listening, can you give us a little bit of a commercial about what is BRAC and what is the exact role that BRAC plays in our cycling world?
Well, BRAC's been around since 1976, and the one person that's been there the whole time is Yvonne Van Gent. She's the membership manager. Most people just say she is BRAC. When it started a long time ago, it always was part of USA Cycling initially. Back in the day when we had districts, BRAC was the district for cycling. She was the district rep. That was a paid position with USA Cycling. And in its heyday, I don't know if it was BRAC then or ACA, but at one point there was at least 5 employees. It was a reasonably sized company. It always was sort of responsible for local racing. The relationship with USA Cycling has changed over the years. Back in, I think it was 98 or so, BRAC separated from USA Cycling and became its own separate organization. Eventually came back to USA Cycling in 2013 and has been what's now called the local association. There are technically no districts anymore, they're just local associations.
And most states have an association like a BRAC, right?
There are 34 of them in the country, or at least were. I think there's been some consolidation recently, but essentially there's most of the bigger states have them, but there's some states that don't have very many riders, so they combine into a group of 2 or 3 states.
And you're kind of the keeper of the stats, if you will, and the points, and the who's won this, and what place, and the categories, and
yeah, we have 40-something years of records.
Yeah.
Either in paper form in our storage facility in Lafayette or on computers here and there. And our website has a massive history of results and points and our database of our membership.
And you took over 5 years ago, is that right?
But yeah, it was November 6, 2014, actually, is when I started.
And what are some of your things that you want to personally accomplish with BRAC? And what are some of the longer? I mean, not COVID aside, I get that, but what's
back to racing? Yeah.
What's the temperature? What's your personal goals with BRAC? And maybe where were you before that? And how did you get involved with BRAC?
Well, I've been in cycling almost my whole life. I started riding in junior high school. Started racing just as I was entering high school. And raced for about 15 years, became an official in 1980, became an international official in 1989. I was a professor at CSU for about the better part of 20 years, and I was eventually enticed away from that job to go work for USA Cycling. I started there in 2003, and that job lasted for 11 years, and then I ended up taking the job with BRAC. As soon as that was over. So I've been an administrator, I've been an official, I've been a coach, I've been a rider in this sport. Ironically, I don't currently ride. In fact, I no longer have a bicycle.
What?
My last bicycle was made in 1978 by the late Roland Delasanta out of Reno, Nevada. And it's hanging up. It's been repainted and refurbished. It's hanging up at Adventure Cycles in Aurora.
Really?
In the retro section.
How come you don't ride anymore?
I got into running and other sports. I got out of cycling. I got into martial arts. I did that for many years. I did running as cross training for martial arts, then decided I really liked running too, so I started competing in that. And eventually my knees wouldn't take the taekwondo anymore, so I just stuck with the running. So that's all I do now.
What did you teach at CSU? That's my alma mater.
Biochemistry.
Really?
Yeah.
You wouldn't have never seen me. I can promise you that. I took one biology class as a freshman, and I didn't do very well.
Yeah, most of my students wish they didn't have to see me too.
Yeah.
It's a pretty hard subject.
That's an interesting career though, switch from being a professor back into the biking world.
Yeah.
What do you love most about it?
Oh, after a while it's just I love the atmosphere of events. I love going to events. I love traveling to events. Probably the most fun I've had is officiating at events. I've officiated in 40 different countries.
Really?
And so when you're got your head stuck out of a sunroof going through Guadalajara with a caravan that's got 600 vehicles in it, and you're managing 3 radios and a couple cell phones and doing the whole thing in Spanish or French or whatever language the race is being run in, to me that's the closest thing to sitting in the captain's chair of the Enterprise. So.
What's been one of your favorite races to be an official at?
Really, there's 2. The Vuelta Colombia was one of my favorites. It was almost as long as the Tour de France. I was there for 3 weeks. The race was like 18 days. And the other was the Tour of Switzerland, which is only 10 days, but just top-notch everything. I mean, it's a different world when you're in some of those races.
So what are some of the biggest challenges with officiating in a race like that?
Basically, our job is, if you're on the referee side of officials, there's judges and there's referees. I was always more of the referee type. Really, our job is to keep everyone else out of the way of the riders so they can ride the bike race. And if you get in a big race, you've ever seen how many cars are rolling down the road, that's my main job, is to make sure that the riders can ride the race and do it following the rules, and they're not helped nor hindered by any outside party.
So, like, what's the difference between a judge and a referee?
The referees are the ones that are enforcing the rules and are managing basically the way the race runs. The judges come up with the results. They're the timers, and they judge the finish, they read the film, and they produce the results. And anything that involves the actual results, that's a judging function. Anything that involves sort of the management of the overall sporting aspects. The way we kind of think of it is, once the gun goes off, the race director just handed me the keys to his Porsche. And it's our job to get to the finish line before we hand it back.
Is that a little scary, going down the road at 80 miles an hour trying to keep the crowds away and the bikers safe? And does that get a little hairy at times?
It's just really fun.
It's like a NASCAR ride?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, you go whipping down a hill in the Alps with some 18-year-old Italian driver who's just having a field day in this really fast car that he's been given, and it can be a lot of fun.
Wow. Is there any one particular memory of, let's say, a grueling race or a crazy event that happened at any race that comes to your head, if I say that sort of thing?
Well, I mean, there's the good and the bad, and probably one of my worst days ever was, I think it was the 92? Yeah, 1992 Ruta Mexico, where a pickup truck went through a field of 220 riders.
Oh my gosh.
And took out most of the Gatorade team that had Buño and Fignon on it. And that was also a race where my car actually ran over Clark Sheehan. And so we always sort of laugh about that now, but he was there, and
he was okay?
He was okay. Well, he broke a bone in his back, but he was okay. But that was looking at 100-something riders lying in a pile, and a bunch of them that, well, they looked dead.
Yeah.
But ironically, nobody had anything worse than a broken bone.
Wow.
And the race continued.
Huh. How about something that made you feel just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they just did that? Like some amazing moment of endurance, or digging deeper than you've ever seen. Does anything come to mind as an official that you watched?
One of the most interesting races I ever did, and I did almost all of them, was the Ore Women's Challenge. And it was one of the first races. It was solely for women, and it was really, really cool, primarily because that was it. They were the show. And the race director was a man, God rest his soul, Jim Rabdow. He came up with the vision of putting on a stage race in Idaho. And he always had these wacky ideas. And sometimes we'd try and talk him out of it. And we'd say, that's the stupidest thing we've ever heard of. He came up with this idea. It was called the head-to-head time trial. He basically had it was a slightly uphill with a steep finish, about a 4 or 5 mile time trial. And he put snow fence down the middle of the whole thing. And he started one rider. You had a time trial, but you had someone starting with you.
Like a dragster race.
Yeah, and so basically it was inverse order of general classification. So you got to the end, and it was Katrin Tobin, and it was some Canadian woman whose name I now forget, and they were top 2 on GC, so they were going to face each other. On top of that, he had these weird, if you beat your opponent, first you got your time, because it was a time trial. If you beat your opponent, they took 5 seconds off your time.
Okay.
If you beat your opponent by 10 seconds, you got an additional bonus.
Huh.
And if you caught the leader of the pair ahead of you, you got an additional bonus. And when we're looking at this going, what the hell, Jim, this is nuts. And it turned out to be like the coolest stage I had ever seen up till that point in my officiating career.
Huh.
And you got there in the line, and the 2 women were basically snarling at each other. They didn't really like each other anyway, and they started out, and they immediately just went for the snow fencing and went boom, boom, boom for like 200 meters down the road. And then they got to the end, and they were just neck and neck, and they got to that steep part, and they both stood up, and Captain Tobin punched it, and the Canadian runner stood went, ugh. And that was it. She was done. And
That's cool.
It was just a really cool, a unique race, something no one had ever thought of, and it really worked in that environment. It was super exciting. How you make a time trial exciting? That's how.
Well, maybe we'll send this to Lucy Diaz down at the Colorado
Yeah.
Classic, and they can put something different in this year.
Yeah.
And maybe let's talk about that for a second, because did you officiate last year at the Colorado Classic?
I did. I was the chief.
That's what I thought. So, what'd you think of that event, and where do you think that's? I mean, let's put COVID aside for now. What's your take on that event, and how do you see it moving forward?
Well, I loved it. I mean, it reminded me a lot of coming back to my roots. A race that was just for women was really exciting to see, and boy, it was an exciting race too. It was just amazing to watch. It was so aggressive, and so many great performances, and I was just thrilled to be a part of it.
So does the UCI moving like the Tour de France basically on top of that race now, if everything stays to the new schedule, how does that all kind of play into the overall world strategy of all the different teams deciding where they're going to be, and how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that the men's version of the Tour de France is going to affect the Colorado Classic that much. I mean, I think if we get back to racing in time, that we have a good full season, I think that race is still going to be super popular. And I don't think the Tour de France would impact that. I'm just hoping that we don't see any more races, get canceled.
Yeah.
If they could have happened, because we are allowed to race.
Right. So you're thinking June 1st is kind of your hopeful.
Well, and I admit I'm being hopeful.
Right.
But yeah.
There's still a fair number of races that could happen for sure.
Yeah.
If that happens on June 1st.
I mean, any race that would have been canceled in April or May, if we can start racing in June, if they want to, and if the municipalities will let them, they actually will be able to find a spot.
Okay. Cool.
So.
Well, I can't imagine a season without bike racing. I'm sure something.
Yeah.
We'll end up with some maybe some just people getting together and figuring out ways to at least compete a little bit. Are you keeping track of some of the virtual races that's happening, and what's some of your feeling on those at this point?
I probably should have paid more attention to that. I haven't really. I know that when we talked to USA Cycling recently, they were working on some stuff with Zwift and going to start trying to do some more focused competition-based things on Zwift, but I haven't myself paid much attention to that, primarily because I don't ride myself.
Right. Are you looking forward to some races, running races this year? Or did you have anything in mind that you were going to do?
I was supposed to be doing a half marathon in May in Santa Barbara, and that got canceled, or at least postponed. I'm still training, hoping they can find a spot for it when we're allowed to get together in groups again.
Yeah. But you love running. That's your thing right now?
That's my competition right now.
Yeah.
Is running.
You're fast. I saw some.
Yeah.
What was you did a 5K last year? Well, I think I saw a time on Facebook. It was low 20s, right?
Well, there was one race I went that fast, but that race was wickedly short. It was actually one of the best races I've had since I started. I took some time off and I started coming back about 2 years ago, and there's no way I did that time on a certified course. And but yeah, that one, I got to the 2 mile point and thought, yeah, I'm having a great day, and then it seemed like I took about 10 more steps and I saw this sign that said, it was like 400 meters to the finish. I'm looking at my watch going, no way.
Do you have a triathlon in your future?
God, no. I've been competitive in my life in all 3 of the sports that make up a triathlon, and never in my wildest hallucination would it occur to me to do all 3 in the same day.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you used to, because you're from California, right?
Yeah, I started swimming when I was 4.
Oh.
I swam until I switched to cycling in junior high school.
Okay.
And then I did that, and I got out of that, I did running. So I'd say I've done all 3 very seriously, obsessively, compulsively, but just would never occur to me to do all 3 in the same event.
In the same day, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite sport, if you look back over the years, something that you'll never get that love of, if anything, like something?
It would be cycling.
It would be cycling, yeah.
Even without doing it, I still consider myself a cyclist. I mean, it's part of my soul. It was what defined me when I was younger. Guys like me that weren't going to be on the football team or the baseball team or whatever, we found the sport, we found our clubs and everything, and that was a domain that we could excel at. And so it becomes a big part of your personality when you do it long enough.
Right. Well, I kind of want to see your take on, I think that the COVID situation will bring out more cyclists. It already is bringing out more cyclists than ever, or people riding bikes who then could become cyclists. I interviewed a couple of bike shops today. Their sales are really strong on bikes that are like $1,500 and less, because people are just now getting into cycling. So maybe we'll have a bubble of new passionate cyclists in a few years that could fuel the road racing and fuel the road riding that's been dipping a little bit over the last few years. Do you think that's maybe a silver lining?
Well, I mean, it's a timely question, because that's exactly what we spent most of last night discussing at the board meeting. What we're looking to do, and USA Cycling sort of started it when they started making bike racing a part of a bigger picture of cycle enthusiast events and interests, and we're going to be going the same way. We might even be looking at changing our name so that we're not just pegged as being that racing organization, because there's so many ways in Colorado these days to enjoy two-wheeled sports. And so yeah, I mean, one of the things that we always would see, we would get a lot of newbies coming out for Cherry Creek time trials. Time trials is a great way to get started, but nowadays with all the great tours like Ride the Rockies or Triple Bypass, then you've got all the other mountain bike events, and you've got gravelers, and you've got Grand Fondos. There's so many events where large groups of people come and they get together and they ride their bicycles, and we would like just to stimulate that as much as actually acquiring racers. Yeah, we would love for everyone, think everyone should race their bicycle, but the important thing is we think everyone should get on a bicycle and do lots of riding. And being out on the bike paths that I run on all the time, it's staggering how many people are out there on bikes and running, and every skateboards and razor scooters, and there's so many people out now.
That's a big shift, though. I mean, I'm encouraged to hear that that's your sort of bigger picture, is to, because your name is definitely suggests racing, and it's been road racing for the most part. You do something, you have cross, but you don't really get into the mountain bike scene a whole lot, and so it sounds like you're broadening maybe. Yeah, we definitely we want to, and we have to as well. But just historically, back in the late 80s, mountain biking went one way and road track and cross went another way. And because of that, it's taken, and we still haven't actually recovered from that. And the whole political structure for mountain biking is different, and it's a different beast. But gravelers and cyclocross have been
sort of the transition where we see road riders going in cross, we see road riders doing gravelers, and now we're starting to get a blending of a lot of riders doing different things, and mountain biking's got an immediate segue into cross and into gravel. So we see that the whole cycling universe here in Colorado, it's one big melting pot of people that love to get on bikes. There's no reason that we or USA Cycling either should pinhole ourselves into this one little niche. And so yeah, we're definitely, that's all the high level planning has to do with how we can rebrand a state level organization for the benefit of all the riders in the state and not just a small subsection.
Well, I'll finish up here with this. Maybe talk about, you've seen the high school mountain bike league really explode, and those events have become marquee events in the mountains, particularly.
Certainly, yeah, they're awesome.
And so how do we get that same feeling on maybe the road and cyclocross for the youth that's happening in the mountain bike scene?
Well, that's certainly the $64,000 question. Mountain biking and cyclocross does have an advantage in that it's a smaller, contained circuit. Parents feel very safe letting their kids go do things like that. These days, I would almost wonder if I had a kid in the right age, would I want him to be a road rider with the way things are going? But we're working with, actually we've had a couple meetings with NICA. We've had, we work with Bicycle Colorado. So we're going to be more involved in things outside of our typical domain, and also with bicycle advocacy. Good. A little bit more than we have been, because it's a pretty big pie. We can make it bigger, but the one thing we don't want is all the pieces fighting amongst themselves.
Right.
And a lot of that's probably harder on some of us that are older, that grew up in a more traditional cycle racing environment, but times have changed. The market has changed, and we definitely want to have a broader market of people that put on a helmet and go out and purposely ride hard.
There you go. I like it. Well, that's a good way to end. And would you come back sometime? Maybe this fall we can see how all these things shook out, and maybe what new things are coming on the horizon, and talk more about some of these initiatives that come to fruition.
That would be great. Well, we'll know then whether we had a season. I certainly hope we do. We'll talk about how it went, and at that point we'll be way along the process. We'll be coming up on a club council meeting where, if we're going to make any sweeping changes to BRAC's position in the industry, we'll have to be ready for that then, because the ultimate authority at BRAC is the club council. So cool. The clubs will have to be involved in this process.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us on Garage Talks, and have a wonderful weekend, and hopefully get out and a little running.
Great. Thanks. Right. Thanks for having me.
Yep.